North Africa was for centuries a melting pot of races, religions and cultures. People mixed with Africans south of the Sahara, with Europeans, Asians and Arabs, through trade, migration or conquest. That mix is evident today in the population, culture and architecture. In this programme, we look at the original inhabitants of North Africa. Who exactly are the Berbers of the region? What was the civilization that gave rise to Carthage? And how did North Africans live under Roman domination? I begin with a visit to one of the best-known and most historic cities in North Africa today, Marrakesh in Morocco. This is its main square, Jama al-Fina. Jama al-Fina is the beating heart of Marrakesh. And throughout the centuries, it was a very important meeting point for the caravan trade across Africa. And that history means you can see from the appearance of the people of Marrakesh that their roots are very deeply connected with the rest of the continent. The culture here is as mixed and vibrant as the people themselves. The dancers, sellers, fortune tellers and snake charmers in Jama al-Fina certainly know how to grab your attention. I decide to leave the doubtful charm of the snakes of Marrakesh and head a few hours out of the city to admire the haunting beauty of the Atlas Mountains of North Africa. This part of Africa has been inhabited for many thousands of years. The foothills of the mountains don't make the easiest of terrains for a gentle stroll in the sunshine. About 20,000 years ago, North Africa was green and humid, and the region we call the Sahara today was not a desert. Fossil evidence shows that North Africa's Stone Age inhabitants were tall with long limbs and low foreheads. We know a little about them from their burial practices. For instance, the discovery of their skeletons showed they might have deliberately removed some of their front teeth. Archaeologist Professor Abdurrahim Mohib says early human remains have been found in prehistoric caves or grottos in Morocco.
The Iberms are people who developed modern techniques of tools. They started to bury their dead and they start thinking about the other world. For example, if we speak about La Grotte des Pigeons, east of Morocco, just near the frontier between Morocco and Algeria, in this cave we discovered a necropole of about 180 skeletons of Iberomaurusians. And we do discover a skull which is called trepanation. Trepanation, the first chirurgical intervention, if you want.
So you must be great neuroscientists now, then. So the people who lived here 20,000 years ago used tools so effectively that they carried out brain surgery. We don't know why they did, but academics like Algerian archaeologist Slimane Hatchi can tell us more.
Donc ce Sahara n'a pas été le territoire d'une population. C'est avec cette civilisation ibéro-maurusienne que nous allons avoir en Afrique du Nord une civilisation qui fait tout le long de la Méditerranée, qui se développe le long de l'Atlantique au Maroc et aussi, mais on ne l'a pas trouvé dans la Méditerranée orientale sur la côte tunisienne.
Afsa in modern-day Tunisia. Around 7000 BC, this is where a new people emerged, known as the Capsians. The Capsians were tall, of Mediterranean appearance, with some African features. They settled on hilltops near water where they farmed and domesticated animals. We know they were artistic. They decorated ostrich eggs and engraved stones, for instance. Dr. Rida Bousoufara is from the Institute of Archaeology in Tunisia.
Il est généralement admis que les Capsiens ont occupé l'intérieur du territoire, alors que les Ibéro-Maurusiens ont occupé les côtes, surtout les zones dunaires. Traditionnellement, ces deux civilisations ont été totalement séparées, dans le temps et dans l'espace. Mais maintenant, les nouvelles recherches sont en train de remettre en question toutes ces vérités, étant donné qu'il s'est avéré que chronologiquement, ils se chevauchaient, et que aussi sur le plan territorial, ils se chevauchaient aussi, ce qui fait que l'affaire ou la question est encore à remettre en question. Nos connaissances sur ces civilisations concernent essentiellement leur mode d'habitat, leur technique de taille de pierre. Donc les éléments les plus importants dont on dispose, ce sont les pierres taillées, les outils, mais aussi les ossements d'animaux qu'ils ont chassés.
The Capsian culture seemed to end around 4000 BC, and this is about the time the people known as the Berbers, or as they prefer to be called, the Amazigh, appeared. They could be a historic mix of the Capsians and the Ibero-Maurusians, but we're not exactly sure. This means that from 4000 to 2000 BC, the Berbers were becoming established as the inhabitants of North Africa. They actually refer to themselves as the Amazigh, meaning free people or noblemen. I team up with Moroccan Berber historian Nouhi Al-Wafi, who's taking me to a small community of Moroccans by the Atlas Mountains who proudly proclaim their Berber heritage. En route, I fancy a snack. And I see a man selling something. Not quite what I expected. Iguanas. They've had their jaws sewn up so they can't bite. Animals caught in the desert are very much part of the local diet, just as they were when early humans populated the area.
هاد البلاصة هادي وجاو النصارى كيصوروا فيها والدم غادي وعند الجرح ديالو كيبرى ما فيهش السم.
He said when he was sewing up the mouth of one of them, it slightly scratched him, but there was no blood drawn. He's looking at you. I decide I'm not feeling peckish after all. Nearby, there's a stallholder selling Berber souvenirs, including the distinctive blue scarf or veil known as the Nila. It's also worn by the Tuareg nomads who live mostly in southern Algeria, Niger and Mali and have common roots with the Berbers or Amazigh.
السبب أن هناك نبتة تسمى النيلة وعادة يؤتى بها من مناطق جنوب الصحراء. بالنسبة للألبسة الرجالية نجد النيلة أيوة هي هذا الطرف الذي المصبوغ بالنيلة ويعطي لون أزرق وهو ينفع الجلد بالنسبة للنساء ويستعمل له لعلاج بعض الأمراض الجلدية. هذه هي النيلة فلذلك
وبيغطي من الشمس.
نعم هو نوع من الوقاية من الشمس. لما تريد المرأة التي تعيش في الصحراء أن تخرج للشمس تعمل هذا على وجهها، يعني تمسح هذا الثوب على وجهها فيترك آثاراً زرقاء. فهذه الآثار تمنعه من أشعة الشمس أنها
أهلاً وسهلاً. إزيك؟ أهلاً. شكراً. ديفيد ممكن تعمل فيني معروف كيف بلبسه؟ I just asked him to put this thing around me. I'm going to be a Berber for a minute. So, I've disappeared. Watch my hair, mister. I can tell you it's actually quite tight. Thank you.
لكن في الصحراء.
كده.
لكن في الصحراء.
شكراً جزيلاً. The blue mouth veil, known as the litham, is actually worn by men, not women.
هذه ظاهرة خاصة بالأمازيغ المسمى بالتوارج اللي يعيشوا في جنوب الصحراء الكبرى. هذا يوضع لمنع تسرب الغبار والأتربة يعني ما تأتي به الرياح في الصحراء، خاصة الرجال يخرجون إلى الصحراء في حروب وفي صيد وفي أعمال مختلفة.
We continue our journey across the valley south of the high Atlas Mountains to the well-preserved old town of Ait Ben Haddou near Ouarzazate. We make our way to Muhammad Jamal ad-Din's home. He traces his roots here for generations. Muhammad offers us tea. Why do they pour it so high?
هذه العملية تساعد على تكوين رغوة للشاي. وهذا التقليد يكون في الصحراء غالبا حيث تكون الأتربة ويكون الغبار، فهذه يعني تمنع الغبار من الدخول إلى الشاي. بقدر ما يعني تعلي يدك تكون الرغوة عريضة، تكون كبيرة.
The residents of Ait Ben Haddou live in a settlement that perhaps dates back as far as the 12th century, which is why it's a popular location for film sets. The people here are pretty self-sufficient. Their animals provide food and wool for clothing. Like the people here, Gnawa music has ancient roots. You hear it everywhere in Morocco, and its haunting spirituality is a fitting soundtrack for the Atlas Mountains and their timeless beauty. Professor Al-Wafi encourages me to go back to Marrakesh to find out more about Berber culture at its most vibrant. For centuries, Marrakesh was significant in trans-Saharan trade. Caravans of camels would stop here on their way all over Africa. And you can see that mixed legacy in the varied faces of the people who live here and in the culture of the storytellers, dancers and fortune tellers at the main square in Marrakesh, Jama' al-Fina.
السلام عليكم. كي دايره اختي لاباس؟ عايشه في لندن.
عايشة في لندن.
انت يا مزيانه وقلبك
لكن مولودة في السودان، لكن مقيمة في لندن.
مولودة في السودان وعايشة في لندن.
وعايشة في لندن حياتي كلها.
شوفي حياتك زوينه. ديري قلبك اخمامك يعطيك الله.
مستقبلي طيب.
قلبك.
قلبي.
اخمامك.
اخنانك.
اشياتك الله.
اشياتك الله.
زنوبة زوينه، انت مزيانه. زنوبة ظريفه وجايه من طريق وغاديه لطريق، الله يديك على خير. قولي يامي. يامي. انت يا مزيانه وعندك الكلمه مع الناس وكلمتك عاليه وما ربي يحن عليك كل ان شاء الله. شكرا حبيبتي. شكرا. شكرا. مع السلامة يا فاطمة. شكرا. I can see why people flock to Fatima. She certainly tells you only nice things about yourself. And in using the Arabic diminutive of my name, Zeinab, she ensures I immediately engage with her. After all, hospitality and the welcoming of strangers is a strong Berber trait. I've made an arrangement to meet a local guide, Abdullahi Shantit.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Hi, Salama. Excuse me, would you like some water?
No, I've had some. Thank you very much.
I'll have some, maybe, please.
So this is the traditional Berber water cellar.
Yeah, he's called in Arabic garab.
Garab,
which means water seller or water vendor. So you can recognize the garab in Marrakesh easily by this beautiful garment, red garment.
And the hats.
Beautiful hat with tassels.
And that's the water in the goat skin.
From the public fountain, goat skin from public fountain. شكرا جزيلا. السلام عليكم.
مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.
So this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
From about 5000 BC, the climate of North Africa began to change, so the region became more like what it is today. By about 1000 years BC, the Berbers were becoming increasingly cut off from the rest of the continent as a result of desertification. But they could still communicate and trade with other parts of Africa, moving from oasis to oasis through the desert. It was easier for the Berbers to interact and mix with Western Asia and Southern Europe across the Mediterranean Sea. And this led to significant changes in the culture and racial makeup of North Africans.
There was a change in between the two sides of the Mediterranean. For example, now from Tangier, from the north of Morocco to Spain, there are some 13 or 14 kilometers. But in some other periods, for example, when the level of the sea was lower, there was only perhaps 6 kilometers or 7, so man can travel.
The first newcomers to North Africa who had a significant impact were the Phoenicians, whose maritime culture spread from an area we now call Lebanon. They arrived towards the end of the first millennium BC in search of silver, copper, and tin. The Phoenicians mixed with the local population of North Africa and gave rise to a new culture known as the Punic civilization. The most famous city built by the Punic people was Carthage, but it is in fact the lesser-known port city of Kerkouan, also in Tunisia, that has the best Punic remains. Now, if I were an estate agent, I'd tell you that houses boast all the latest conveniences, including lead pipes for carrying water. If you wander around the site, the layout of the city is pretty evident. It's believed that about 2,000 people lived here. They were mostly middle class, made up of artisans and tradesmen, and they lived in family houses, individual dwellings. There were actual private bathrooms here, which suggests that they could obviously transport water into the homes. And the rooms are quite spacious, so all that indicates a relatively high standard of living. The Phoenicians moved around North Africa and laid down roots, including in what is now Africa's largest country, Algeria. One of the biggest sites from the Punic era is the ancient city of Hippo, what is modern-day Annaba in northeastern Algeria. This is what remains of the original Phoenician port at Hippo. It was built around 800 BC, and at that time, the waters of the Mediterranean would have surrounded this area. Phoenician traders mingled with the local Berber population. 500 kilometers from Hippo, in the fishing town of Shechel in the province of Tipasa, you can see more evidence of the Phoenician presence. All that remains of the Phoenician era in this pretty town of Tipasa is this rather lopsided tomb. We don't know who was buried here, but we do know that it is Phoenician because it's similar to tombs found in Carthage. Algerian archaeologist Al-Fakir Rida explains that it is important to stress that once the Phoenicians mixed with the local Berber population, it gave rise to a new culture known as the Punic civilization.
على العموم البونيقيين اللي هم أحفاد الفينيقيين انطلاقاً من القرن السادس قبل الميلاد سيطروا على التجارة في الحوض الغربي للبحر الأبيض المتوسط.
What kind of things did they trade?
يجيبوا منتوجاتهم اللي هي في الحقيقة فخاريات وحلي وما شابه، ويأخذوا المواد الأولية من ذهب من فضة من المنطقة.
The Punic civilization grew rich from trade. The famous city of Carthage was believed to have been founded in the 9th century BC as a trading centre. Its people became known as the Carthaginians.
This area here in Al Hawariya in Tunisia was once a Punic quarry. Yellow and red sandstone was quarried from here and used for the building of monuments, towns and cities, including Carthage. From their base here in Carthage, the Carthaginians took territory from the Berbers and held land roughly equivalent to modern-day Tunisia. The Carthaginians controlled the North African coast from what is western Libya to the Atlantic, as well as parts of southern Europe.
Carthage is said to have been established by the famous Queen Dido, though some historians doubt her existence. However, Tunisian archaeologist Leila Lajimi Sabai tells me that the legend of Dido, written by the Roman poet Virgil, does not do her justice.
Elissa Didon, c'est un personnage absolument extraordinaire parce que c'est une femme fondatrice d'empire. Et ça n'existe, c'est le seul et unique cas dans l'histoire de l'humanité. Eh bien cela, les Romains ne pouvaient pas l'accepter. La société romaine était une société plutôt patriarcale. Virgile, qui était le grand poète de l'empereur Auguste, a écrit l'histoire de Didon et Énée, et il les a fait se rencontrer ici à Carthage avec une grande histoire d'amour. Et cette histoire d'amour a fait que Énée était obligé d'aller fonder Rome, et il a laissé la reine Didon ici, et la reine Didon s'est suicidée par amour. Or, ce n'est pas du tout ça l'histoire. En fait, Elissa Didon s'est suicidée pour sauver sa patrie, parce qu'elle ne voulait pas se marier, justement, avec un chef berbère. Alors, c'est une femme héroïque. Et Virgile en a fait une femme séduite et abandonnée par Énée, comme si Rome et Carthage étaient équivalentes, comme si elles étaient chronologiquement fondées en même temps. Or, Carthage est plus ancienne que Rome. Donc, il y a une sorte de reprise de l'histoire, de réajustement de l'histoire, qui est complètement fausse.
This is one of the two Punic ports in Carthage. One would have been used for trade, the other by the navy. Today, they're just sleepy, picturesque fishing ports, so you have to try to imagine just how busy they would have been in their heyday. It was Carthage's success in seafaring and trade that made it a great maritime power, but this aroused the envy of Rome, which saw Carthage as a rival.
In 264 BC, the Romans took Sicily from the Carthaginian leader Hamilcar in what was known as the First Punic War. Then in 218 BC, there was one of the most famous military campaigns of all time. The Second Punic War was started by the Carthaginians when Hannibal, the son of Hamilcar, crossed the Alps with a 90,000-strong army and dozens of elephants.
Hannibal, c'est une des plus grandes figures de l'histoire de Carthage. J'aime beaucoup Hannibal, mais c'est dommage parce que c'est une figure militaire. C'est la figure d'un général, c'est la figure de la guerre. Mais il est vrai que Carthage était très menacée à l'époque de la naissance d'Hannibal. Hannibal, qui a fait pendant 20 ans la guerre, et puis qui est venu ensuite en Afrique. Il est revenu à Carthage au bout d'une trentaine ou une quarantaine d'années pour essayer de reconstruire la ville de Carthage. Malheureusement, ça n'a pas pu être possible parce qu'il y avait malheureusement des traîtres à Carthage. Il y avait des traîtres qui l'ont vendu à Rome et il a été obligé de s'enfuir et de mourir de manière tragique puisqu'il s'est suicidé.
By the year 149 BC, the Romans mounted a huge offensive to finish off the Carthaginians once and for all. They landed in Utica near Carthage. The people of Utica switched sides and backed the Romans in what became known as the Third Punic War.
It took 3 years before the Carthaginians were defeated by the Romans. 3 years of desperate siege, and by the end of it, Carthage was completely destroyed. It was more than a century later that the Romans built a new city on the site where ancient Carthage once proudly stood. So, the remains you see around me today are actually those of the Roman city of Carthage.
puisque Carthage a brûlé pendant une semaine. On a appelé la destruction de Carthage Hiroshima du monde antique, parce que véritablement, ça a été une destruction d'une très, très grande violence. Carthage, évidemment, elle a été détruite par Rome, et il se trouve que les historiens qui ont parlé de Carthage étaient souvent des gens qui étaient plutôt du côté des Romains, les Grecs et les Romains. Donc nous n'avons très peu de renseignements qui viennent des Carthaginois eux-mêmes.
The Romans gave their newly conquered land the name of Ifriqiya.
Oui, on parlait de l'Afrique. Eh bien, l'Afrique, c'est en fait la Tunisie. C'est le pays qui, dans l'Antiquité, a pris le nom de Africa, Provincia Africa, qui allait de Carthage jusqu'à Constantine en Algérie et de Carthage jusqu'à Tripoli, et qui ensuite, petit à petit, est devenu le nom de tout le continent africain.
The Roman province of Ifriqiya was one of the wealthiest regions of the Roman Empire and covered a large expanse of fertile territory in North Africa and became the breadbasket of the empire. The Romans managed their North African empire through a network of rulers. They could be Roman, Punic, or Berber. There was some intermarriage between the locals and the Romans, but the Berber population retained many of their traditions. Even today, the Berbers have their own distinctive culture. Their carpets and rugs, for instance, bear special designs.
انت ممثل كويس، بعين على وتنزلها تحت وتاني تعمل كده. أيوة. تحصرها تحت كده. ايوه كده. ايوه لكن ده بياخذ زمن طويل. بياخذ مدة شهر قلت. أيوة. عشان يخلص.
تقريبا 2 إلى 3. تفضل.
شكرا. هذا بربري.
And this is what a finished product might look like. During Roman rule, new Berber kingdoms came into existence. One called Mauritania, for instance, was established in the 3rd century BC and corresponds with the Mediterranean coast of what is today northern Morocco, not modern-day Mauritania. And the kingdom of Numidia comprised what is now Algeria, along with parts of Libya and Tunisia. You can see from the ruins at Hippo, modern-day Annaba in Algeria, how well the Numidian kings lived at this time.
Hippo is one of the oldest cities in Algeria. It was first established by the Phoenicians, but it came into its own when a local Berber king called Gaia renamed it Hippo Regius and made it his capital. Behind me are the ruins of his palace, and Hippo Regius remained a royal city for the Berber kings who succeeded Gaia. It was his son Massinissa who helped the Romans defeat Carthage, and it was he who united the Berber kingdoms into one single kingdom called Numidia.
Massinissa was the most powerful of the Berber kings. He was born around 238 BC. This coin bears a depiction of his face.
This is the main road in the royal city of Hippo. It's called the Cardo Maximus. And I was trying to do a regal walk because this is where the Berber kings of Numidia would have walked along with their families and entourage.
Another great Numidian settlement is the beautiful city in eastern Algeria of Constantine, or Sirta as it was originally known. It was built on top of this magnificent gorge.
This is one of the bridges of Constantine that connects the inhabitants with one another across the deep divide of the Rumel Gorge. It was first settled by the Phoenicians, but it was King Massinissa who made this the capital of his new kingdom.
Dr. Kaltoum Kitouni is the director of the museum at Constantine.
تعرفي أن مدينة قسنطينة بنيت على صخرة وكانت محصنة بالواد، إذن فكانت كمان موقع كمكان استراتيجي للمدينة الملكية.
Massinissa was the Numidian king who established a dynasty that lasted for 250 years.
مثلا من خلال النصوص، يعني أن الشيء اللي وصلتنا من خلال النصوص الإغريقية واللاتينية، يقول عن ماسينيسا هذا الإنسان القوي حتى إلى السنة 80 من عمره يركب الحصان وممكن أنه يبقى طول اليوم على قطعة خبز، ولو أنه ممكن أن، وهذا دليل على القوة البدنية التي كان يتمتع بها. من خلال أيضا السمات الفيزيولوجية التي نراها على وجه القطعة النقدية، أنه بالفعل جميل الوجه، جميل تسريحة الشعر.
Some Berber rulers, like King Massinissa of Numidia, managed to maintain their power base. Massinissa had backed the Romans in their battle against the Carthaginians, so they allowed him to rule and even expand his territories.
على كل حال ماسينيسا كان معروف بمقولة: إفريقيا للأفارقة، أسترجع أرض آبائي وأجدادي. لأنه لما مثلا قام بهذا، يقولوا التوسعات أو ولكن هي استرجاع، في بعض ما وراء السطور وفي بعض النصوص نجد أن ماسينيسا لو بقي على قيد الحياة لا أخذ كل إفريقيا.
As it was, King Massinissa reigned for many decades until his death around 148 BC.
King Massinissa died at the ripe old age of about 90. It's believed he was laid to rest in this mausoleum on a hilltop just outside Constantine. He'd had an active and productive life. In fact, he left behind more than 40 children, including one who was just 4 years old. The dynasty of Numidian kings he'd established was to last more than 200 years.
Massinissa was succeeded by one of his sons, Micipsa. After Micipsa's death in 118 BC, a power struggle ensued, and his nephew, Jugurtha, became king. He clashed with the Romans, triggering the Jugurthine Wars around 112 BC. Jugurtha was defeated and killed by the Romans. The Numidian kingdom grew weaker, and North Africa came increasingly under Roman control. Decades later, another member of the Numidian royal family, Juba I, made one final attempt to maintain some independence by taking on the Romans in Hippo in modern-day Algeria. But he was no match for the great Roman general, Julius Caesar.
This statue was commissioned by Julius Caesar to mark his victory in 46 BC over the forces of King Juba I here at Hippo. The bronze statue depicts the armor and toga worn by a Roman cavalryman. Accounts vary as to what happened to King Juba I after his defeat. He either committed suicide or retreated to the desert where he was stabbed to death.
King Juba I's son, who bore his father's name, was taken to Rome as a youth and educated there. On his return to North Africa, Juba II built the city of Caesarea, named in honor of Julius Caesar. It's now called Shershel and is in the Algerian province of Tipasa. Rida Hakim is an Algerian archaeologist based in Shershel.
Juba de quitter le roi ici à Shershel, où Shershel avait rendu capitale d'une province. Juba était élevé à Rome, il voulait faire de Shershel une ville extraordinaire, une ville vitrine, où il a édifié les différents établissements qu'on peut les visiter. Nous avons l'amphithéâtre de Shershel, nous avons le théâtre, nous avons le forum, c'est la place publique.
Juba II ruled over land from western Algeria to Morocco. He established his capital at Volubilis, in what is now the northwest of Morocco. Volubilis is the most impressive Roman site in Morocco. The area remains as fertile as it was in Roman times. The civic buildings and triumphal arch are intact, and the beautifully preserved mosaics give us an idea of what this royal city would have looked like.
It was in the 1st century AD that Volubilis really flourished. King Juba II was a highly respected and cultured monarch. He wrote many books about history and geography.
Juba II was married to Cleopatra Selene, the daughter of Egypt's Queen Cleopatra and the Roman general Mark Antony. They had 2 children, Ptolemy and Drusilla. Mustafa Atki is the curator at Volubilis, where King Juba II had lived with his family.
Because he was educated in Rome, does that mean that he lost all his Berber culture and tradition?
Juba II, ce qu'en fait le caractérise, c'est qu'il ne s'est pas contenté de ce qu'on lui a pris à Rome, mais il a pris connaissance de ses origines berbères locales et il les a exploitées également dans les différents domaines qu'on connaît. À titre d'exemple, dans les effigies monétaires qu'on voit en relation avec Juba II, on peut voir l'éléphant, qui est un symbole africain.
Volubilis prospered in this period under King Juba II, and he found a colourful way of making money.
King Juba II made a fortune from selling purple togas to the Romans. And even today, the Moroccans are masters at dyeing textiles and leather. The colours in these dyes at this tannery are all derived from natural sources. Henna for orange, mint for green, and saffron for yellow.
King Juba II is said to have ruled for 50 years until his death in 23 AD. This is his magnificent mausoleum in what is modern-day northern Algeria. It's where he and his wife, Cleopatra Selene, were buried. The mausoleum was built entirely from stone and originally stood 40 meters high, but it's been damaged throughout the centuries by the elements and vandals. After Juba's death, his son and heir Ptolemy should have succeeded him, but he was killed by Caligula, the Roman emperor. After Ptolemy's death, the Romans tightened their grip on North Africa. They established many towns during the time they dominated the region. But whilst these may have been largely designed by Romans, they were built by local labourers and made from local materials, so it would be more accurate to describe them as Numidian Roman.
هذه المدن اللي يقال عنها في أنها رومانية بالنسبة إلى فقط إلى تخطيط العمراني الكارد والديكومانس، ولكن لو ننظر إلى النمط المعماري البنايات نجدها تختلف عن المدينة الرومانية. لم يأتوا الرومان إلى منطقة هكذا شاغرة ويقطنون فيها.
Some of the best remains in North Africa from the Roman period are in Algeria. I make my way to see the ruins of Tipasa on the northern coast. The ruins are extensive and little visited by outsiders, though Algerians certainly like to spend the day there.
Experts here believe that only about a third of the original Roman town of Tipasa has been excavated. أهلاً وسهلاً يا شباب. السلام عليكم. أنتوا من هذا المدينة؟
نعم
من هذا المدينة. وأنتوا عارفين إيش هذا المبنى؟
هذا عبارة عن متحف.
متحف. ومن تعرفوا من أي وقت في تاريخكم؟
من الرومان.
من الروماني، من الحضارة الرومانية، الجيل الروماني.
نعم.
وأنتم بتعتبروا يعني هذا تاريخكم؟
نعم. تاريخنا وأرضنا.
صح. ويعني مبسوطين عشان عندكم تاريخ كده.
فرحانين بها وهذه جميلة.
Similarly, Timgad in eastern Algeria has ruins which are so well preserved that it seems as if people were living here recently, not more than 2,000 years ago.
Now, one of the more interesting jobs that the locals had to do was to empty the urine from the public latrines, take it to the tanneries where it was used to cure leather. Now, the Romans used to tax urine, and if you think about it, that would have provided them with a pretty steady source of income because, let's face it, it was never in short supply.
To get a better look around the ruins of Timgad, I meet up with a local guide, Abdelkawi Tawfiq.
Thank you so much for showing me around.
You're welcome.
Timgad.
He's keen to show me the remains of the gate to the city.
This is a beautiful arch here. Tell me about that.
This arch, it was built when they make the extension of the 3rd century, and it became the official gate of the city.
Now, there's a temple to Jupiter somewhere. Is that it there?
Yes, this is the big temple.
We're crossing the Forum
Yes.
and going to the theatre. So here we are. Oh, look, there's an audience. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Zeinab,
yes.
Come here.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
And speak.
Okay, well, I'm in an Arabic-speaking country, so I'll say Assalamu alaikum. There's a real echo here.
Yes.
You say
echo.
something.
مرحبا بكم في ثموغادي.
You said, welcome to Timgad.
Yes.
If we could sing.
What do you want to say?
Sing anything.
Algeria. For Algeria, we see for it all, for a peace. For Algeria, we see. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Very nice, thank you. You get an idea of what life was like here in Timgad from this graffiti that's been scratched into the stone in the Forum. And it's inscribed in Latin. I'll give you the translation. It says, hunting, washing, playing, laughing, this is life.
By the 1st century AD, North Africa was important economically for the Romans. Not only was it the breadbasket for the Roman Empire, it also provided a steady supply of slaves, gold, olive oil, and ostrich plumes. The physical presence of the Romans in North Africa is evident from the Latin stone inscriptions, impressive and extensive ruins in the region. But in cultural, linguistic, and religious terms, the Romans left a light footprint. In the next program, we chart the impact of Judaism and early Christianity in Africa, and how North Africans in particular made significant contributions to Christian thinking and practice. We also look at the enduring presence of Africa's indigenous ancestral religions, which millions of people on the continent still practice.